Hey guys, how are all of you doing? Hope fine, and yes, this is the next part of Game of Shadow in Naruto world. Where I am in the Naruto world. I have a name that isn't mine and I have a really nerfed version of the gamer. Is that all? Am I forgetting something? Right, inventory. At that I received yet another disappointment. Let's start without any delay. Tsunade. How had this happened? She didn't know, but she was blaming Jiraiya, of that she was sure. After all, she'd been perfectly fine before her old teammate came to visit. Gambling and drinking was what she did, and she was okay with doing that for however long she managed to live. She might not like the idea of Shitsune spending her life as her friend/student/carer, but that wasn't her decision to make, and she'd given up convincing the younger woman to leave long ago. Tsunade had been living like she did for a long time, and she'd never faced a bigger problem than someone trying to get her to pay a debt in a casino or something of the sort. Trying being the operative word there, since she would be hard-pressed to find a person that could actually make her do something that she didn't want to do. She almost welcomed the idiots trying to do something to her. Getting to smack some fool around was fun once in a while. She'd never had to fight someone that was actually a threat, but Jiraiya had managed to drag her into such a battle. There she stood, in front of Shitsune and facing what seemed to be a cross between a man and a shark. Even his sword looked like a strange mix between a blade and a sea monster, scaled, with a mouth and living. This is definitely Jiraiya's fault, she thought to herself, eyebrows twitching. Tsunade couldn't even expect the one that caused this to help her either, much to her annoyance. No, because the stupid pervert had to deal with his own freak wearing a black cloak with red clouds on it. An Uchiha to boot, although he had a mini Uchiha of his own on his side, so she supposed that was good. How did this happen? Tsunade wondered again, increasingly angrier as time passed, and she asked herself the same thing again. She jumped back, the Sharkman's sword striking the place where she had been standing a moment before. She'd been fine, gambling, losing, but who cared? Money on a game, when suddenly Jiraiya had entered the place with not one but two brats following him around. As if he wasn't annoying enough on his own, the old bastard. At least one of them was quiet, the same couldn't be said for the blonde one though. It was like seeing a mini version of Jiraiya. Although, this Naruto also reminded her of. The picture of a brown-haired, brown-eyed boy flashed through her mind, perpetually blushed cheeks and wide grin in place, just like he'd always looked. Tsunade closed her eyes for a moment, pushing away that image and concentrating on her battle. Her mind wasn't done though. It flashed back once more. This time to the conversation she'd had with her old teammate, about how their sensei was calling for her to come back, and to the letter that said teacher had sent her. They were asking her to come help heal the village that had now suffered an attack when it hadn't even completely recovered from the Kyuubi. They were, apparently, in need of her for more than even her specialization in medical techniques. As if she would do anything for the village that had cost her almost everyone she cared about. Tsunade's eyes widened when her opponent, probably realizing that she was more trouble than it seemed at first, changed his approach. Maybe it had been a while since she'd been an active kunoichi, but she had kept up her training, if a little less strictly than in the past. She was called a Sanin for a reason too, so she was no easy target. The same couldn't be said about her student. Shitsune's own eyes widened when the maniac with a living sword charged at her, cackling all the while. She was good, Tsunade would proudly tell anyone, but she was not on her level, and neither was she in this freak of a swordsman's. Strengthening her legs, the Sannin prepared to jump back in to intercept their attacker. Her instincts were telling her that she was late. Even with all her strength, she wouldn't reach them in time. Her body might still be trained, but evidently her reflexes had suffered. Tsunade almost felt proud when she saw her student realized that she couldn't get away fast enough. She'd soon acknowledged that the attack would hit her and thus, did something else other than trying futilely to dodge. Instead, she opened her mouth and a dark purple cloud escaped from between her lips, surrounding herself and the swordsman. Poison, obviously. Shitsune had always been better at that than even Tsunade herself had been. It was her specialization, even if the woman herself wasn't a fan of the art. It was what she was good at, and she would use it effectively, even if she preferred to heal over harm. Unfortunately but expectedly, that wasn't enough to deter the man from his attack. The strange sword slashed and proved that despite its appearance, it could do a sword's job and cut. The scales were the reason, Tsunade guessed, but that was as far as her mind went because a second later, all she could see was the red. Blood was everywhere. It drew an arc following the curve of the sword's path. It splashed against the ground and flowed down her student's body, a sight made possible by the wind taking away the poison cloud Shitsune had unleashed on her attacker. It covered Tsunade's hands too. It covered Dan. And she couldn't stop it, she couldn't stop the blood from flowing. She couldn't do anything as her student was attacked. She couldn't do anything as he died. She couldn't do anything. Her knees gave up from under her, her shoulders sagged and she felt her face paling. The blood was everywhere and it numbed her mind. She couldn't move, she couldn't fight and she couldn't heal her student. She couldn't do anything, once more, as the fear of blood stopped her. Fear of failing to heal a loved one once more, ironically keeping her from doing just that. She could only look. Again. Oh. Naruto Uzumaki. Why me? Naruto wondered to himself as he slapped a seal tag on his arm. Instantly, the illusions of crows and men in black and red cloaks disappeared. Thank God IG made me do these tags, he thought to himself. They didn't last long, burning through the chakra embedded in them quite quickly, but they would do the job for a good few minutes. Or, that would be the case for someone else. For Naruto, he would be good to go for a good hour or so. Maybe the secret to the Uzumaki clan's prowess with Fuinjutsu was just the stupid amount of chakra they could pour inside the things. Naruto was quite sure that was it. That wasn't the time to think about that though, he reminded himself as he looked around. The old lady, Tsunade or whatever, was fighting the shark guy with the other, much nicer lady. On the other side, Pervy Sage was fighting Sajuke's brother. Sajuke's brother by blood, at least. Naruto didn't know what to think of that. The younger Uchiha was not so far from the blonde, his hands already placed in a dispelling seal to get rid of the genjutsu. The Uzumaki didn't know how Sajuke must have been feeling then and there. Everyone in the group knew what he wanted to do and what he'd been through to decide that was his goal in life. How would his closest friend, IG didn't count, feel with his brother suddenly so close? Naruto would easily admit that he had no clue about the answer to that. Looking at the other boy then though, the blonde was surprised to note that there was none of that unrestrained anger that he'd expected. He's after the fox? The Uchiha asked, the words cutting through the sound of the battles going on around them. Naruto grimaced at that. Would Sajuke get angry at him for having his brother's attention? They're after the fox. The boy corrected himself then. Sharp one, isn't he? Naruto heard in his mind and blinked. Since when can you speak to me? he asked out loud, drawing a confused look from Sasuke before he sheepishly pointed at his gut. At that, the younger Uchiha's eyes narrowed. "Since you started working on your mindscape," the fox replied. "I just didn't see the point in doing so before now. And now you do because these people are after me," the creature sealed inside him growled. "And I won't be hunted as if I were mere prey. Also, you don't have to speak out loud, you know that, right?" No, he hadn't known that. Naruto's silence was telling, and he almost could see the fox rolling his eyes at him. He chuckled weakly, scratching the back of his head. "My container is a dumbass." "Hey!" Naruto protested, before blinking and realizing that he'd, possibly, maybe, proven the fox's point with that. Completely idiotic. This time, the Uzumaki remained silent, gritting his teeth. That is, until he felt the now almost familiar feeling of the fox's energy coursing through him. Looking down at his body, he saw wisps of the red chakra coming out. From the corner of his eyes, Sasuke tensed. "Naruto." "I'm okay," he mumbled, his right eye twitching as anger dripped into his mind. Everything seemed so annoying all of a sudden. He wanted to punch things, everything and everyone if at all possible. "They were all little shits I hate the feeling this gives me though," he grumbled, gathering his thoughts and reminding himself that this was the Kyuubi's effect and not his own mind. "What do we do?" the Uchiha asked, and that was a good question. These people were pushing around Pervy Sage and his old teammate. Much as he didn't want to admit it, they might be a little out of their league here. Provide support, not get in their way. Naruto offered with a grimace that Sasuke immediately copied. Neither liked how that sounded, but it was what it was. Gotta train more after this, he decided. "Are you gonna use it?" Sasuke asked with a raised eyebrow, and he grinned. "Well, I have a bet to win, don't I?" Naruto asked, drawing a snort from the Uchiha. "How about you?" The other boy grunted in response. "I think I can use it once," Sasuke added with a twitch in his expression. Evidently, he wasn't quite happy with his progress. Neither was Naruto, for that matter, but they'd both have to make do. Their attention was called back to the fights then. Evidently, they'd taken too long to think over the situation. It was at that moment that Pervy Sage was attacked with a great fireball, and the old lady's apprentice was hit by the shark guy's sword, sending blood everywhere. "Move, idiot!" the fox snarled inside him, and he readied himself. "You help Pervy Sage, you know your brother better than I do," Naruto told Sasuke, receiving a stiff nod in response. "Ha, figured he'd be, well, not happy, but not so reluctant either," the blonde thought before shaking his head. "Move already," the Kyuubi demanded. He moved. With the chakra beast's chakra running through his pathways, he felt on the top of the world. Angry as all hell, but also equally as powerful. In the blink of an eye, he stood in front of Shitsune. He was pretty sure her name was. In another instant, he'd set two seals between himself and the swordsman. An orange barrier rose, stopping the sword for a moment. The creepy weapon didn't seem to take that too well though, opening its mouth and seemingly sucking the energy off the seal. "Oh, that's not good," Naruto thought to himself. Indeed, the fox agreed. For all the times the Uzumaki had wished he could get along better with the Kyuubi, he wished he hadn't agreed with him this time. Oh! Tsunade. She needed to move, she needed to help. Tsunade knew that. The blood tied her down, however, reminding her of her failures. Reminding her of what happened when she was on the battlefield. reminding her that everyone she was close with would die in the end. And so, she sat there, on her knees, only being able to watch as a genin jumped in to save her student. Shitsune tried to drag herself up, maybe even join the battle again. The wound was too much for the young woman though, who could only hold on to her shoulder with her uninjured arm. Behind his barrier, the blonde sent a bunch of kunai around, all of them with tags. Naruto Tsunade reminded herself. The least she could do was use the boy's name, if not out of respect, then out of gratitude. She blinked when, as the swordsman moved around the first orange barrier, orange, of all colors, another rose right on his face. Then another and another, until both Naruto and Shitsune were surrounded by them. That wasn't quite right though, the upper part was open and the swordsman knew that weak point didn't remain for long as the blonde threw his hand up and the top side was sealed too. They were far from safe though, everyone realized. The living sword seemed to be sucking the energy right out of the barriers and Tsunade would bet that they wouldn't be able to hold up for long. Naruto seemed to know this too, because he stepped outside the barrier, running away in the opposite direction from where the man was standing. Guess he made the barrier so that he could go through. Tsunade's addled mind guessed. Then she watched, body weak and hands shaking, as the swordsman jumped over the defensive structure and followed the blonde. As he did so, she saw another Naruto stepping out of the barrier from another side. Where did that one come from? She wondered, blinking, surprised. A clone. She hazarded as she turned back to where the first blonde had gone. However, that didn't make sense. A simple clone wouldn't fool a ninja just like that. Although, there had been no sign that there was another Naruto inside the orange construct, which begged the question of how that came to be. Seal illusions. She guessed again. As good an answer as any, especially considering how Naruto had been boasting about his seal techniques and whatnot. She'd ignored most of it, really. Especially when he'd said that he was studying that technique. That brought her mind back to their bet. Could it be? No, it was impossible. Hey, Grandma, Naruto called next to her. When did he get so close? Tsunade thought to herself. You are a medic, aren't you? What are you waiting for? Shitsune needs help. He half asked, half demanded as he took one of her arms and started dragging her towards the closest orange barrier. No, no, she protested weakly, without being able to muster any strength into her limbs. The blood, she added in a whisper. There was blood everywhere, especially where they were going. She almost stepped on it. Yes, yes, there's lots of blood, Naruto exclaimed exasperatedly, pulling her arm even harder, unaware of her crippling fear. That's why you need to stop it. Shitsune can't. That made sense, self-healing was difficult, even for experts, and that wasn't even taking into account how serious her student's wound was. However, Tsunade couldn't. She couldn't do it. The blood, the wound, healing. She couldn't. Come on. The boy urged, and at any other time it would have galled her to be ordered around by a genin, let alone someone so young. As it was, her mind could barely work through the red haze that blood cast over her mind. Come on, I can't heal her and everyone else is busy. Are you just going to leave her like that? To die? Her mind whispered to her and she felt her muscles tense up, even if she couldn't gather the strength to move or even push off the boy that was still dragging her, this time through the orange barrier. Her eyes found her student, looking pale, even as she tried to heal herself. To her credit, Shitsune was actually doing it, but it wasn't nearly fast enough to actually be effective. Tsunade knew that there was no way her student would succeed on her own. She also knew that there was little chance of her surviving if she continued bleeding. Bleeding? No. Help her already. Naruto demanded, looking more panicked than angry now. What are you waiting for? Tsunade-sama is afraid of blood, Shitsune said, and her teacher almost flinched at that. Shame filled her as she heard her student say those words, as if they justified being left alone, to possibly bleed out. I don't care. Naruto shouted. She's your friend, isn't she? He asked Tsunade, staring intently at her eyes. His had turned red and slitted, she noticed, and, at any other time, would have felt fear just seeing them. She's your student. Do something. The last part was even more panicked than what he already sounded before. Shitsune had tried to say something, probably in Tsunade's defense, I don't deserve that, only to mumble incomprehensible words and slump down, almost passing out. The blonde boy had rushed to her side, uselessly holding on to the woman, trying to lend her support. Do something. Tsunade heard in her head, Naruto's words echoing in her mind. But, what if Shitsune died anyway? What if Tsunade failed again? She would lose her student, her hands covered in her blood signaling her failure. She couldn't take that, she couldn't. But you can let her die. A voice whispered in her head and she flinched. She's your friend, the boy's words continued repeating themselves in her mind. She's your student. Tsunade took a step forward. She had to try. Even if she failed. She had to try, right? Oh. Naruto Uzumaki. He turned around as soon as he saw the old lady move towards her student. Much as he wanted to help out, he couldn't. Man, I wish I had asked Iji and Hinata to teach me some first aid, he complained to himself. No use crying about it though. Especially when the shark guy was already on his way back. After all, Naruto's illusion seals were good, yes, but they didn't last long, especially if he tried to make them move far from the actual seal. It was already a wonder it had lasted as long as it had. Think you can make a fool out of me, huh? The man asked, although he was still grinning, as if he was amused by his attempt at distraction. Naruto didn't know what he would have preferred, honestly. I mean, I don't need to do much, he shot back. Man, Naruto was sure that many in the group would have smacked him just for that comment. He needed to do something to calm his nerves though. At least the guy didn't seem to get angry with that either, instead barking a laugh. I like you, kid. A shame I have to take care of you, the guy said, and Naruto grimaced. No cowering. The fox shouted in his mind and his back straightened. As if the blonde shot back with a wide grin as his body was enveloped with the beast's chakra. His mind raced through the seals he had already prepared and some that he could make on the fly if given half an opportunity. With the speed and reflexes enhancement that the Kyuubi chakra gave him, he had even more options than normal. He stepped outside the barrier. It wouldn't do to have the Tsunade interrupted from saving Shitsune, after all. He eyed the living sword the guy carried warily. If that could suck the energy out of his seals, then it could probably do so with himself, right? Wow, that was almost smart, the fox commented, making his eyebrow twitch. Sometimes Naruto almost forgot why he wanted to make friends with the stupid rabbit. For my power, of course, the Kyuubi told him, and he could almost see him rolling his eyes. And I'm not a rabbit. Naruto sighed. Power really wasn't worth all this annoyance, he was sure. Now, a friend, that might be worth it. He'd never have enough of those. Ready or not, brat, here I come, the swordsman announced before jumping in. Regardless of his internal musings, Naruto jumped into action before the man could even finish his sentence. He dashed to one side, and then towards the man himself. A clawed hand reached to cut into the swordsman's torso. As Naruto expected, the hit was nowhere near actually touching him before the sword swung his way. Which made the fact that he'd prepared for that good, otherwise it would have been a rather short battle. Good thing he was used to fighting someone with a sword that was leagues ahead of him. Although, Iji's blade wasn't nearly as big as this one, but it gave Naruto something to work with in this situation. I just have to expect him to be 3 steps ahead of me, easy, he thought to himself with a wry smile. Being the weak one in the fight sucked. More red chakra coursed through him then. More power filled his limbs as he dodged a downward cut from the strange sword. The crimson cloak that covered his body became even more distinguishable and, while he couldn't see those changes, he was aware of 2 ear-like constructs appearing on top of his head and 1 tail behind him. I knew you cared, he teased in his mind, receiving only a huff in response. Rolling his shoulders, he dashed around the man that had been charging once more. His eyes caught the smirk falling off of the shark guy's face. Apparently, the more fox chakra he used, the more serious he would get. Slow power-ups are a bad idea, Naruto told his partner. Just fight, will you? The Kyuubi demanded, and the clear anger in his voice made Naruto decide to stop annoying him, for now. Why did I get stuck with an idiot? Ignoring his tenant, the blonde continued, focusing all his energy on dodging the scaly sword that his opponent was swinging at him. He didn't think he stood a chance actually fighting him, after all. Naruto knew where his strength laid, and that was traps and schemes, not close combat. He could do well enough in that, of course, but against someone that was clearly stronger than him. Yeah, no. Why won't you stay still for a second? The shark guy asked. Although, contrary to his words, he was actually still grinning. Almost like he's having fun with this, Naruto thought to himself, feeling the blood draining from his face. Okay, the blonde replied. It was a good thing that he didn't actually expect the easy acceptance to startle the man, because it didn't. Instead, the sword slashed towards him once more. However, it was stopped by an orange barrier once more. This again. That seemed to kill the swordsman's mood, making his smirk disappear. I mean, they are kind of my thing, you know. Naruto asked, and this time it was his turn to grin. More and more barriers rose from the ground. Beforehand, as he dodged, he'd set hidden tags all over the place and was now activating them all, with the shark guy right in the middle of them. He'd even set up some on nearby buildings so that he would have a roof for the orange prison he was building. How do you like them? I like the color. Time to go. Ha! Naruto jumped at the new arrival, or would have if he hadn't been grabbed by the arm and dragged away from where he stood. He almost had a heart attack, thinking it was the other guy, Itakai, that had gotten him. A moment later, he sighed in relief, realizing that it was, instead, Jiraiya. What had happened in the other fight, he didn't know, but it couldn't be that bad if his sensei was there to take him away. Still, just in case, Naruto checked that his seal against genjutsu was still working. That cleared all doubts he could have had about the situation. That barrier of yours and a little distraction of mine should be enough. We have to get away, Jiraiya told him, and he righted himself, the fox's power still flowing through him. Naruto nodded as they dashed towards where he'd left Tsunade and Shitsune. He was hoping everyone would be able to get away. It was a shame that he hadn't managed to try using that Hiruzen Sarutobi. It was true Inoichi informed him, and the Hokage didn't know if he should be happy about that or not. The kid shared a look with the other two, both Onaki and Mai looking as grim as he imagined his own expression was. It was a good thing that the Yamanaka clan head had reported that he was close to a breakthrough not so long ago. Hiruzen had been about to send the other village leaders away, but this news was much better delivered in person, and the other two had been too curious to do anything but stay for a bit. They had, thankfully, agreed to send most of their people back home, remaining in the village with their own protective guards. That decision had been a hard sell, especially for the I1 since they would be hard-pressed to trust Konoha in any way, but Onaki had convinced them somehow. The less Hiruzen knew about that the better, he was sure. Silence followed Inoichi's short statement, and one could see the three Kiges' minds working behind their eyes. Hiruzen, I believe we can trust you to punish Kumo and Suna for what they've been participant to. Onaki asked in the end. Anyone else would see that question as a sign of actual trust, but the Hokage knew that it was almost a threat. Iwa had been a victim of the attack, even if they hadn't been the targets. The people they had brought had been dragged into a battle that had nothing to do with them. One such example was young Kurotsuchi. The stone wouldn't let this go, and the leaf would earn even more animosity if they didn't make the ones responsible pay the price. I think it's time for us to go, Mai said then, her eyes focused on something else. We have much to deal with, even without this new revelation, she added, and Hiruzen understood. She had not only lost a Jinchuriki during Kiri's weakest point, but she had lost the one that was on her side. That left the mist with Yagura only, and everyone that was anyone knew what that meant for her. I better start preparing to go back to Kirigakure. The woman broke the silence once more before leaving the room. I know about your plans for Suna, Hiruzen Onaki told him once it was only the two of them after he dismissed Inoichi. My village won't stand for it. The Hokage caught what he did there. His village, he'd said, not himself. Not that Hiruzen expected that his fellow leader was overly pleased with his decision regarding the sand. Their plans for Suna were good enough for Konoha, but they did nothing for Iwa, and that was something that couldn't stand. Do you have a proposal then? Hiruzen asked. A risky move, to offer an open question like that, but he was testing the other Kige, and Onaki most certainly knew that too. At times like this, they couldn't afford to be at each other's throats, and neither wanted that anyway. We have only one Jinchuriki now, and there's a group of people that are probably looking to attack us again to turn that number into a zero, the diminutive man mused, voicing Hiruzen's fears. Between this Uchiha that seemed to be able to control even Kiges and a group out to get everyone's Jinchuriki, he could already feel a headache coming his way. Tsunade couldn't get to Konoha soon enough. I want Konoha's support with this, Onaki said, making Hiruzen blink. That certainly wasn't what he expected the Sushikage to say. The stone asking for the leaf's help. He had to have heard that wrong, right? And we'll only accept the one Konoha that has proved himself to me and to our people. We want the Weaver. They wanted Ig. Hiruzen supposed it made sense. Ig was no genin, and that had been made abundantly clear during the invasion. Not a week had passed since then, and every nation had a bingo book entry about him. The Weaver, they called him, which the Hokage supposed was appropriate. Not only did it fit his summons, but it also fit the transformation they'd witnessed him go through using Orochimaru's seal. Which now nobody knew if it would remain available, with the mess that the mark had caused together with the Hakkaibe's chakra. And that wasn't even mentioning how it fit with him being the wielder of new ivory, the sewing needle. Thus, Konoha gained a new A-rank ninja in the eyes of the world in the shape of Ig Sata, the Weaver. Danza had been so insufferably smug about it that Hiruzen would probably know all about the boy's entry even if he hadn't had to learn it as a Hokage. You understand that I can't just lend him to you, much less on his own, Hiruzen voiced, frowning. Ig Sata was important, nobody could deny it. Maybe not so much in the present, but everyone knew that he would be in the future. He couldn't risk something happening to him. Even if he trusted Onaki in some measure, he didn't trust the rest of Iowa nearly as much and definitely didn't trust the enemy the Sushikage wanted the boy to fight. I'm not asking for him to be on his own, but he is the important piece here, Hiruzen the other leader replied. He's already proven himself to my people. He saved my granddaughter, 2 times if one counts the invasion. He helped all of us come out on top during our fight with Orochimaru and his undead puppets. My people will at least give him the benefit of the doubt, if not much. It's the best Konoha can get from us. And it really was, Hiruzen supposed. Any other Konoha nin would be received badly in the land of Earth. That is, if they weren't immediately attacked. Ig was probably one of the few ninja from the Leaf that had any amount of goodwill. The Hokage could understand though. After all, it would be a good while before any Konoha nin trusted someone from Suna or Kumo after the invasion. He didn't have to like it though. Ig was part of the future, and Hiruzen was loath to risk his life like this. Children should be protected, especially such a promising one. The Leaf would reach new heights if his generation was allowed to grow, he was sure. To waste such a thing now. Then again, a possible alliance with the stone was something that might never happen again. Hiruzen was really starting to hate his job. You do know he's currently unconscious, right? The Hokage asked. After all, few people knew that Ig had actually woken up. Sort of. Hiruzen himself was still processing all that he had learned that day. Although, he wasn't really lying since the boy had remained unconscious after that. Either the effort he, or Hakai, in this case, had made was too much for his weakened body, or things had gotten worse with this beast Hakai had mentioned. And I also know that he won't be for much longer, not if you and your people have any say on the matter, Onaki replied, sure of what he was saying. Which, to be fair, was a completely correct assumption. Even if that wasn't the case, it should be. Because my people are already less than trusting most of the time. So, now that we lost one of our Jinchuriki, they'll be worse. Meaning that the goodwill Ig had earned was worth even more, Hiruzen gathered from that explanation. He was really going to have to do this, wasn't he? He really couldn't retire fast enough. It'll be done, then he agreed in the end. Also, a word of advice, Hiruzen Onaki started again, and the Hokage almost cursed out loud at his tone. This wouldn't be good news, that much he knew. As it turned out, he was right. I wouldn't send away too many of my forces in these times. Kumo will be jumpy now that they know they aren't as untouchable as they thought. Especially if they find out about this new enemy that we are facing. Which they would, that was a fact. The Jinchuriki losses might be a secret held by the Leaf, the Stone and the Mist, but it wouldn't remain so for long. That, together with the fact that the A himself had been controlled by an outside force, would have Kumo reach new levels of wariness. Not to mention that all nations would have their eyes on them. At least the Sand had an excuse for the invasion, the same could not be said for the Cloud. That was just the start of it too. Kumo was obviously going to go through lots of changes now. No way they would let her remain Kij, and there was an equally as low chance of the man himself even trying. Especially not after having accepted a Yamanaka in his head, even if it was just to gather information. I'm too old for all this, Hiruzen lamented. Honestly, Hiruzen Onaki mused, looking out the window of the room. We've been too old for a while. Indeed. Oh. Ig Sata. Are you sure this is a good idea, Ig? Kij asked warily, and the boy could only roll his eyes at him. For the third time, yes, I'm sure, he replied, doing his best to continue projecting calm. The beast seemed to have gained a measure of calm, thankfully. It was still twitchy, prone to lash out at the smallest of things or for no reason at all, but it was a great step up from what it had been like before. At least now they could contain it with just one person. Still, he wasn't about to leave the mindscape just yet. First, because things could still get out of control really fast. They'd had a few incidents of that nature since he had his little breakthrough. Second, because he seemed to be the only one that could make the beast remain peaceful. Third, and most importantly, I'd been discussing what they knew about the situation with Kij and Hakai ever since the latter came back into the mindscape. His creation had brought with him all the information he'd gotten from the original Orochimaru, and that was plenty to start with. It was unfortunate that none of them had much knowledge regarding Fuinjutsu, but they could still think, plan, and theorize. First chance he got, Ig would read all he could get his hands on regarding seals though. Even if he couldn't learn it all, Hakai or Kij or both could do so after he'd gotten them the information. They'd talked about it some, and he could probably project the words like how he'd communicated with Hakai, and they could write the information inside the mindscape. That way, he'd just need one read for them to have something to study. You have to admit that it is a dangerous thing what you are doing, Hakai said, merely stating a fact. Which Ig understood, he really did. It was still annoying that they continued doing so. I know that, he ground out. But everything is dangerous in this situation. And neither of you can tell me this can't be the edge that we need. Silence followed his statement, and Ig basked in his victory. The beast roared and he almost lost concentration. Blinking, the boy regarded the creature. It didn't seem to be about to throw a tantrum, so, what had that been about? Did it sense your pride? Hakai mused, making Ig blink once more. Is that a possibility? He wondered to himself. He guessed there was a chance some of it had leaked through his projection of assurance. Had the beast celebrated his victory? That sounds almost cute, now, if only it didn't look like that though. This is madness, Kij mumbled. Yes, Ig and Hakai readily agreed. This is my mind now, the boy continued with a deadpan. What does that say about me? I think you don't want an answer to that question, his creation answered. I guess. Ig admitted with a nod. So, how goes the research? As well as it's been going so far, Kij replied with a grimace that said more about the situation than his words. Run everything by me again, will you? The boy asked. Since he was using most of his focus to keep the aura of calm, he'd found that it was easier to think about something if someone else was speaking about that. Both Orochimaru constructs must have been very scared of him, since they didn't show annoyance for even a second at the requests since they had found out about that. The running theory is that the beast formed through the cursed seal's ability to absorb ambient natural energy and the continued presence of and exposure to Hakai B chakra, possibly the Ichibi's too. That energy mixed with the purple flame manifestation that was already in your mindscape, what we think represented the tainted natural energy of the cursed seal. All those together seem to have formed the beast, as far as we are aware, Hakai recited, his eyes fixed on said creature. The reason no other cursed seal holder has reacted badly to Baijua Chakra so far is either none has been exposed as you have, or the things you've done with your control over your mindscape have affected your mark in a way that makes you different from them. Kij took over the explanation as IG nodded along, taking all the info in once more. The summarized version, at least, but they had already gone over the details at other times anyway. Separating me from the natural energy manifestation might have unwittingly changed your seal in some way. And wasn't that a terrifying possibility? More because of what could have happened if it had gone wrong though. After all, messing with seals was a sure way to end up dead, especially with one that was on his body and tinkering with it through his mind. IG was lucky he hadn't blown himself up, consciousness and all. Anyway, we have two theories about how to solve our current issue, Hakai started after a moment of silence. If we get rid of the cursed seal altogether, the beast might be separated from your body, since you have no other seal that would contain it like Jinchuriki do. On the other hand, we could, possibly, change the mark into such a seal for you to keep it, something that would, possibly, help defend you against the beast's influence. There were too many possiblies in those theories for IG's liking, that was for sure. That's where their lack of information held them back, sadly. After all, they couldn't very well come up with other, maybe better, solutions, without a better idea about the art though. The boy sighed, massaging his forehead. I'm very tempted to just get rid of the seal, IG mused, carefully not looking at either Orochimaru copy. I'm not sure the power-up is worth it. Or, it wouldn't be if I didn't know what's coming. You said the situation had solved itself without you there, Hakai pointed out, and IG sighed again. Kij, meanwhile, remained silent. None of them knew what would happen to him if the seal was taken off. He could disappear with it, or he could remain, as another consequence of IG's meddling. Yeah, but I've changed too many things. I can't be sure that everything will be okay, the boy replied with a frown. I'm not nearly as strong as to be able to guarantee anything. Especially if I lose the cursed seal. I need more power than what I have, and a chakra beast would go a long way to making sure we have a much better chance. Better have less power than not being able to fight at all, Kij said, and IG had to reluctantly agree with that point. I know. We'll see how likely we are to be able to keep the beast. If the chances are low, we'll just have to erase the mark and hope for the best. The fact that even that option wasn't a guarantee of being back to top form was concerning, but it was what it was. IG would have to wait until Jiraiya or some other Fuinjutsu expert looked over his case. He hoped for the former though, since he was the one that was the most accomplished with the art. With a few years, he might have been able to trust Naruto for this, and he would have liked that much better. Unfortunately, the blonde wasn't nearly as advanced in Fuinjutsu as this required. A growl interrupted the conversation, and both Hakai and Kij took a step back, eyeing the beast warily. IG, meanwhile, just looked at it. After all, it didn't seem to be particularly angry or annoyed. Currently, its limbs looked like a weird cross between dog and spider legs, and, as was becoming usual, it had 8 of them. Its body looked more like that of a crab's, although its eyes were those of a frog. It was unnerving, but IG was becoming more and more used to the creature's bizarre appearance changes. Hey there, he greeted, almost like the beast was just another puppy from the Inuzuka vet. Man, when was the last time I went there? Are they okay after the invasion? Did you need something? He asked with a tilt of his head. The thing looked much smaller than what he remembered it being like when it was rampaging through his mindscape, now barely the size of a bedroom. It growled something back, but IG was relatively sure that it wasn't something that should worry him. Or, maybe, he should be worried about how little the beast frightened him. It couldn't be normal to be so relaxed around such a thing, right? Do you need something? He asked curiously, keeping himself relaxed and projecting that, even if he was also ready for it to snap at any time. Things would be much easier if he could get along with the beast. If he couldn't, then that was that, and he'd at least tried. However, if he could, then that would be a massive boost to his chances with what was to come. The thing only growled again, and IG almost grimaced. Yeah, this isn't going to get us anywhere, he thought, trying to think of a way to. His musings were interrupted as the creature stomped one of its legs on the ground. The boy almost brought up his barriers for another tantrum, but stopped himself when that was all the creature did. God, if you just want to have fun, couldn't you, just? He trailed off. How did I know that? How did I know it was just bored? He wondered before looking at the leg, which had buried itself on the ground. That was to send the message to my mind. So it can affect my mindscape besides destroying it. Was that why I was so focused on it after all? Compulsion. The beast growled again. Okay, give me a minute to think of something, yeah. IG said, bringing his hands up in a placating gesture. Guys. He called to Hakai and Kij, who were standing some distance away but not too far from where he was. He wanted to roll his eyes at them, but really, they had the right of it. He was the weird one for not fearing the literal force of nature that was inside his mind. Maybe I'm finally going crazy in this world. It was about time, I guess. Entertainment, you say? Hakai asked, as if he had grown a second head. Regardless, with a sigh, the man considered the question. Maybe give it a playground. Playground, huh? Guess I can take one of the training grounds and turn it into that. Okay then, IG said, clapping and starting to walk in one direction. Follow me, big guy. We are going to make a hell of a place for you to entertain yourself. His announcement was met with the most threatening of growls and another stomp on the ground. Then, he blinked and regarded the beast once more, almost sweat dropping. Who would have thought, huh? Sorry, he waved, ignoring the nervous looks from his two companions. Big girl, my bad. Let's go, yeah. I'm sure I can make a fun place for you to play in. With that correction, all aggression was lost and the beast shrunk. When did it grow back? And started walking next to him, as if it was the biggest, most dangerous and eldritch-looking dog he'd ever seen. As they walked through the streets of his Konoha recreation, he couldn't help but let his mind consider his situation. How does life keep finding ways to catch me off guard? Oh. The beast. She was confused, yes, but not nearly as much as she was when she woke up for the first time. Everything was strange. Seeing things was baffling. Sounds were shocking. Smells were strong. Touching things was weird. Even tasting the air was a confusing experience. She wanted it to stop. So, she did the only thing she could, and that was just thrash around. Not something to be proud of, she knew, but everything had been so incomprehensible then, and once she started she couldn't stop. Pain came from every hit, every stop and every crash against the inhabitants' shields. They tried to contain her and almost succeeded sometimes, but they couldn't stop her if she really set her mind to it. She was strong, and she was proud of that. She wouldn't be trapped, no, she wanted to be free. Now, if only things could stop being so confusing, then maybe she could have calmed down before. However, that didn't happen. Instead, the shields became stronger and, suddenly, she couldn't break them anymore. She could move around a bit, but she couldn't do nearly as much as before. That was not as bad as she first thought, she would reluctantly admit. It gave her time to find some peace with the disorienting situation she had found herself in at least. Everything was still terribly overwhelming though. Until, it wasn't. One of them approached her, none of them had done that yet and she'd thought they were afraid. The other two seemed to be, at least. This one didn't look scared though. Instead he just kept walking towards her. Was he going to use barriers on her once more? Was he going to do something else? Were they going to attack her? To kill her? Suddenly, she was the one that was afraid. She hated it. However, he did nothing of the sort. With him, instead, came a sense of calm that had been all but foreign to her back then. It made her senses seem like more than just painful experiences. Everything became clearer as her mind was able to focus. Was this what sensing was all about? Seeing? Hearing? It wasn't terrible. The one that approached brought calm, she realized quickly. It seemed to radiate from him, like light seemed to come from the bright thing that floated up, out of reach. So, she made sure to remain, mostly still, unless something surprised her. It wouldn't do for him to decide to take the calm away. However, the calm soon grew boring. The novelty of her senses passed and she wondered if she needed the calm anymore. She was afraid of it disappearing though, so she would behave, but boredom was eating at her. She wanted to do things, so she decided to take matters into her own hands. The misunderstanding about her gender was annoying, but the smaller thing, the bringer of calm, IG, she thought she'd heard one of the others call him, had corrected himself quickly, so she would let it pass, this once. Especially since it seemed IG would give her something to do, something to entertain herself. She turned sharply when she noticed one of the identical pair going to comment on that interaction. She might tolerate the bringer of calm, but the others weren't so lucky. She would stand for nothing coming from them. He closed his mouth and took a step back. Good. He was angry. That was as much as Sasuke could gather at the moment as he moved, as quickly as possible, together with Jiraiya, Naruto, Tsunade and Shitsune. They were on the run, which didn't give him much time to process emotions either. However, he very much doubted that even having some time for his thoughts would help much. The fact that he couldn't be sure if his anger came from his own emotions or the cursed seal made things worse. It could even be both, for all he knew. Sasuke could really do with a moment to check his mindscape, but at the moment he didn't have that. He didn't because his bro Akatsuki could be chasing after them, after Naruto. Or, well, the fox. It was the same thing, as far as he was aware. The younger Uchiha was sure that nothing good could come from them getting their hands on his friends even if he wasn't the actual target. We can't continue running, Tsunade, the woman they had been looking for in their trip, said. Her face was pale and she was, unexpectedly, the one that was slowing them all down. However, Sasuke didn't have it in him to blame her for it. She was carrying her wounded student and trying to heal her. She also looked half out of it, making him wonder what had happened to her in her fight, especially since Naruto had been found alone when they reached their fight and she had been inside one of his barriers. We can't stop either, Princess Jiraiya replied, curtly but not unkindly. Sasuke blinked, for the first time picking up on that nickname. It reminded him of Iji and the I-1 in, for a moment. Which in turn made him wonder how his brother was doing, back in Konoha. He shook his head, there would be time for that when they were safe. I can't heal Shitsune like this. The woman shouted, half crazed. I know that, but we can't stop with them probably right on our. I have a plan, Naruto interrupted, and Sasuke wondered if he was thinking about the same thing as he was. However, how would the blonde pull it off? As far as he knew, he needed a little more preparation than what he had at the moment. Then again, Naruto always found a way to surprise. What plan? Jiraiya asked, not looking the least bit annoyed at the sudden and rude interruption. I can use the seal we've been working on. You think you can pull that off? With all of us? Their teacher questioned with a frown, eyes darting back to where they were coming from, as if expecting Itachi and the shark guy to appear at any second. A reasonable assumption, if anyone asked Sasuke. He knew how good Itachi could be firsthand. I can, if the fox helps me, and he is more than willing, given the situation, Naruto informed them, and not a single one of the group looked even the slightest bit reassured by those words. Sasuke himself felt supremely uneasy at the knowledge that his friend, his brother, was making deals with what could very well be considered a demon. He knew he'd done so before, that he was trying to reach some kind of understanding with the tailed beast, but he also knew that the blonde was nowhere near the point where his efforts could be considered successful. Brat, we can't trust that right now. We also can't keep running like this. They'll catch up. Naruto pointed out, and no one could refute his claim. Where would you even? I left one right where we were fighting. Oh, that explained it. Typical Naruto, leaving seals everywhere, just in case. The most annoying part of that habit was that half the time, those random seals were actually used effectively. Sasuke sometimes dreaded what his teammate would be able to do once they grew a bit. He'd certainly never want to fight him in a place or fight where he actually had time to prepare, that was for sure. That was already the case right at that moment, he supposed, but at least there was a non-zero chance of being able to do something. Sasuke was sure that wouldn't remain the case for much longer. Fine, Jiraiya accepted, and if that didn't describe how bad their situation was, then nothing did. What is the brat gonna do, Jiraiya? Tsunade asked, clearly not following the conversation. Well, prepare to pay up on that bet, princess, that's all I'm gonna say, the Toad Sanin replied with a grimace that contradicted his confident words. Oh no. We are not doing that, the woman refused instantly, palling even more. Absolutely n. Then we continue running. Jiraiya shot back before she even finished, making the woman's mouth close shut. Despite the fact that she couldn't deny that they had run out of options, she was clearly not happy with the situation. Not that any of us is, really, Sasuke thought to himself. Thought so. Let's stop, the man nodded, looking grim. Do it, Naruto, he ordered in the most serious voice Sasuke had ever heard him use. Okay, so the blonde said, looking nervous for once as he slapped a seal on the ground. Around his body, the red chakra of the fox swirled and gathered in a cloak that was almost familiar to the Uchiha now. Everyone touch me, the boy said, and everyone did so. Sasuke and Jiraiya placed a hand on each of his shoulders, while Tsunade got a hold of one of his arms, while Naruto took Shitsune's hand in his free one. 1, 2, 3. Then, Sasuke felt his vision blur. Blinking, he was just in time to see a bright orange flash before their surroundings changed. In a second, they were all back to where they had picked Naruto from his fight with the shark guy. Sasuke's lips tugged up. It may be an incomplete, very chakra-consuming technique at the moment, but the blonde was on his way to mastering it. Naruto would be the next person to show the elemental nations the Flying Thunder God technique. He snorted as the blonde fell to the ground, passed out. Not yet though. Oh. Ig-Sata. This is one of those things that I never even imagined could happen, even after I came to this weird-ass world, he mused as he looked ahead at what had been Training Ground 33. He had changed most of it though. Now it was a pseudo-forest of death, full of oversized trees and lots of space for the beast to roam, run and overall entertain herself. If it makes you feel better, we didn't imagine anything like this either, even after you told us your story, Kij said next to him, sitting on the same tree branch Ig was standing on. I don't think anyone imagines such a thing, Hakai added his part then, much in the same position as his counterpart, but on a different branch over them. Then again, this world is weird and full of weird people. True enough, Ig nodded. His focus, much like the other two's, then moved completely back to the beast. It had stopped bouncing around and was looking towards them too. The youngest of the trio grimaced when the creature stumped on the ground, sending a message directly to his mind. He wasn't a fan of that method of communication, he could tell anyone that. It was uncomfortable, to say the least, to have someone or something be able to touch his mind in such a way. Still, he supposed he should get used to it. He couldn't very well antagonize the thing by shielding everything, and having a way to communicate was important at the moment. Here's hoping things will get easier with time, Ig thought to himself. What does it want? Hakai asked, his voice belying how tense he was. Something to do other than exploring, if possible, he informed his two companions. It wasn't much of a demand though, it seems happy with the little playground we made here. I don't know what we could do, Kij mused, rubbing his chin. Maybe some twists here and there to change the forest into something more resembling an actual playground. He asked, and Ig was struck by how weird it was to see someone that was basically Orochimaru take to entertaining what was basically a child so seriously. An overpowered, very dangerous child, but still. I guess we could also. Hakai started, before trailing off with a grimace. Play with it, he finished. Ig wasn't sure if that expression was made out of fear or disdain. The latter was more along the lines of what he would expect considering their origin, but the former could very well be the case too. I'm sure we can think of something. The boy shouted for the beast to hear. He could have used his power over his mindscape to carry his voice if he just spoke normally, but those kinds of things made everything confusing. He didn't want to rely on that power for more than maintaining the place if he didn't have to. It would make his return to real life, whenever that happened, more difficult and awkward than it was already going to be. The beast bound around a bit, excitedly, if Ig had to take a guess. She was looking much the same as before, with the 8 canine-looking legs and the crab-like body, except that the latter now had fur instead of shell. It was difficult to tell if she had changed her eyes too, because of how far they were from her. With that said, the boy leaned back a bit with a thoughtful expression. Upgrading the place isn't gonna cut it for long, I don't think. Playing with her would do it, maybe it would even help get on her good side and all. However, we can't be playing with her all the time. He received 2 agreeing hums in response. So, we need something else to keep her entertained, Ig mused before sighing. What could we even do to He trailed off then, as his eyes locked on the beast herself, more specifically on her body. She was changing again, but not much. The legs remained, once more, but the body was shifting. Where she had looked flat before, she was now more resembling to the dog or wolf those legs could very well belong to, even if there were too many of the limbs. Her head, now that she had one, was still out of place though, looking more like a feline's than a canine's. At least she's all mammal, that's a little less bizarre, I guess IG thought to himself. That wasn't the important part though. No, what guaranteed the boy's attention was an idea that popped in his mind at the new look of the beast. She looked like something that would hunt, and what better way to entertain a hunter than with prey, right? Can I do that though? He wondered. IG. I think I have an idea, the boy said, silencing the other two as they watched him mull over this new idea of his. IG had refrained from making more copies of Kij and Hakai because he didn't fully trust them as it was, let alone more of them. Once, he'd had the idea of creating a new being from scratch, a mind presence that was completely his own. However, he had a healthy fear of artificial intelligence. This wasn't completely like that though, but IG didn't feel like seeing if his own creation would try to take over his body. This new idea though, didn't hold nearly as much risk, really. His first few projects were shut down before he could even truly start working though. IG couldn't use those for what he had in mind, although maybe there would be something they could be applied to later on. No, for now he had a specific application in mind. He could make other things later. The boy thought back to his visits to the Naruto compound and their forest. Shikamaru likely wouldn't be a fan of what he was planning to do, but IG could apologize later and maybe change what he was doing. He wanted as clear a picture as possible at the moment though, and that was as close as he would get, he supposed. Slowly, the deer formed in front of him. First, he focused on the structure, the shape. Second came how it looked, that took a bit more time since it needed far more detail. Eventually though, IG had what could pass for the most perfectly taxidermied deer ever. I see, he heard behind him as he inspected his creation, looking for imperfections. He wasn't sure if that was Hakai or Kij, but he had more important things to focus on. Like giving life to the construct now. Slowly, he loaded what could be considered the newly formed deer's mind. First it was senses, so that it would know its surroundings and what was happening around it. Then came the movements. He didn't put patterns though, no. IG focused more on giving it the capacity to make all the movements that it was physically supposed to be able to do. From there, came the part that he liked the least, the AI creation. He wouldn't give it a mind, per se, but he'd have to program something in it, otherwise he'd have to control it personally or have Hakai or Kij do it themselves, and that kind of defeated the purpose. Instead of giving it the capacity to think per se, IG simply gave it the ability to learn what movements worked best for what it wanted to do. To learn to move effectively, basically. Then came putting inside it objectives, for lack of a better term, otherwise it would just stay still like a statue, since it wasn't truly living and thus had no reason to move even if it could. Thus, he put in it the necessity to eat and drink. There was plenty of grass in the forest for it to feed on, even if it didn't really need that, and there was a river running through the center of the training ground too, so those would be covered. Instantly, the deer started moving. It was a hilarious sight, since it hadn't learned anything yet, so it was mostly just spasms and such. Slowly, the mind IG had given it started doing what it was made to do, and the deer started learning what worked and what didn't. Soon, it was moving like what the boy imagined a newborn would, but that was fine, Soon enough, it would be moving like a true deer, or so he hoped. After simply watching it for a bit, IG continued working. He was almost happy with what it was right then and there, but there was a key expected that needed to be added. It needed to flee from the sight of the beast. After all, the whole point of this was to entertain it, and the boy imagined giving it something to hunt would do the trick. That command wasn't activated instantly though, since that would mean it would run away immediately. Well, it's programmed to learn how to move, to eat, to drink, and to flee from the beast as soon as I activate that last part, he explained to Hakai and Kij as he turned around. Then he blinked, since there was an added presence there, looking curiously as he worked. The beast was closer than before, looking directly at him and the deer. "Hey there. Wanna come and see? I made this for you to have fun," he called out. He didn't expect a response, least of all an immediate one, but that was what he got. The beast barreled towards where they were, making Hakai and Kij tense up. A moment later, the creature was tilting her head from side to side, taking in Ige's creation. When she finally turned towards him, the boy was pretty sure she wanted an explanation. "Well, I thought you would like to have something in here to hunt," he explained simply with a shrug. Ige hoped his idea was right, otherwise he would have to think of something else and all the work he'd put in that would be a waste. Maybe he should have just asked before doing all that. It was nice practice for if he wanted to do something else with less complex animated constructs inside his mind, at least. He shouldn't have worried, apparently, because the beast started bouncing around enthusiastically. She reminded him entirely too much of the puppies in the vet. I guess she is a puppy, in a way, if I consider the moment she formed as the moment she was born, the boy mused idly. It's actually kind of cute, he thought as he continued looking at the excited creature. Anyway, he said after a moment, I'll make a bunch of this and let them roam the forest so that you can have your fun. How's that sound, girl? Ige asked. The beast stomped on the ground and the boy got a very positive response in his mind. It was almost enough to not make him grimace. Almost. Maybe make a way so that they multiply on their own. With a limit, of course, Hakai offered when the creature went away and continued exploring its new playground. And some other animals. You could fill this place with them. Even use some as a way of monitoring the place and even defend it if it came to that. Kij continued that thought and Ige smiled. Yeah, let's think about that, yeah. The boy nodded before frowning thoughtfully. That first one sounds good though, and useful. Let's see. And with that he was gone again. It wasn't too difficult to make the change required for them to multiply. After all, he didn't have to bother with actual breeding and pregnancies. Just have two deers occasionally do something specific with each other and then have a small one appear, like in video games. Maybe later on he would bother making it more realistic, or maybe not. For the moment, it was all more about utility. He didn't even try to make a real baby either. It was just a smaller deer that looked the same as the adults. It would grow with time though, he'd done at least that much. With that out of the way came the easiest part, setting up a number limit so that his mindscape wouldn't end up overflowing with the animals. Taking into account the size of the training ground, he set up a number that he thought would be good enough. At least, if he was right, there shouldn't be a deer everywhere you went, but if you put any effort into looking, you'd find one. Well, girl, there you have them, Ige announced as he took the one deer he'd made and copied it so that there would be a bunch of them. Then, he activated the flee command and the thing scattered in a straight line away from the beast. I'll have to touch those AIs later on. Just gotta be careful not to let them actually think nor learn too much. Anyway, I would wait for a bit so that they can scatter and all that. It would also probably be good if you don't go all out, wouldn't want it to be too easy, right? IG blinked as the beast seemingly nodded quickly, tongue out. She really looks like a... He trailed off when the creature's head shifted to that of a wolf. Then he narrowed his eyes. That's a very specific change. Why would it? Is it reading my mind? He sighed as the beast tilted its head confusedly. Well, at least there's something else that's weird, IG noted, looking at the beast's 8 blue eyes. He didn't know if that was good though. Then, he frowned. I don't think I like calling you the beast all the time in my head, he mused out loud. What do you think would be an appropriate name, guys? When he turned towards Hakai and Kij, both were looking at him like he'd grown a second head. Yeah, I guess that's fair. Eventually, Hakai sighed. He stopped immediately after starting when the creature growled at him. IG corrected, suppressing a smile. It was kind of amusing to see the 8-legged 8-eyed wolf chastising the Orochimaru look-alike. Hakai started again, putting special emphasis on the word and almost rolling his eyes as the beast nodded, pleased with herself. Looks like a dog or a wolf, but with 8 legs. Maybe you can name her like one of the Inuzuka Ninken. That suggestion was met with aggressive barking, growling and menacing crouching. That's a no, I think, IG assumed with a tilt of his head. How does she know what an Inuzuka Ninken is? He couldn't help but wonder. Did she get knowledge from my mind? That could be very bad. So, Kij. Maybe something relating to her legs and eyes. They are kind of her special feature, besides being so big and a chakra beast. That is the original shade of Orochimaru said, looking thoughtful. It seemed like he'd given up on the strangeness of the situation too. That only left something with Hakai. I like that idea, the one that was named like that voiced, making both IG and Kij roll their eyes at him. You would, IG answered, but seeing as the beast had yet to react to the proposed idea, he considered it. Maybe not with Hakai, but something related to spiders. They have 8 legs and eyes too, he mused as he looked at the creature, both thinking of ideas and checking for what it thought about the ideas. The boy was pretty sure the beast had perked up a little bit. Not overly interested, but at least it hadn't reacted negatively. That was good. Now, what to use for a name? How about Sachigumo? Kij asked then, clearly having agreed with IG's line of thinking and avoiding names with Hakai, of all things, in them. It's an actual creature from legend, the earth spider, a huge monstrous spider that would prey on anything. I think it fits, he added, that last part being said almost like an afterthought. Poor Kij didn't expect the reception his idea got from the beast. He was tackled to the ground and his face was promptly attacked. Hakai could only look midway between panic and confusion as the events unfurled. IG, meanwhile, started laughing out loud. Congratulations, Kij, you've made a new friend, it seems, the boy said with a wide grin as he approached the duo. So, Sachigumo, ha. I don't know how much the nations will like that you have Sachi in your name, but they'll just have to deal with it, ha. He mused out loud as he hesitantly extended a hand and started petting one of the beast's legs while she continued her attack. At the enthusiastic bark that he received in response, IG decided to just let things be. He was certainly not going to try and change the name that she clearly liked. He might find himself disturbingly at ease in her presence, but he was not mad enough to try and argue with her. He had better survival instincts than to do that. Now what? Hakai asked, obviously very done with everything and finally deciding to just roll with things. Ig supposed that was the best approach, really. Craziness seemed to be fond of them, or him, at least. Well, now I guess I can work on those animals some more, maybe make some others, Ig mused. It's not like there's much else to do while we wait for help to solve our little issue, he added, looking towards the newly named Tsuchigumo, who continued to attack Kij's face with her tongue. A smirk tugged at his lips. Help me, you two. The shade of Orochimaru demanded. Maybe we can try with birds now? Hakai asked. Yeah, I like the we in that question. I don't feel like doing all the work, Ig nodded. Hey. Kij tried again, only to be ignored again. Hiruzen Sarutabi. Hakai again, I'm guessing, he said, almost casually, as he stared at Ig Sata's body. His sole visible eye was golden yet again though, which belied who was currently truly in control. It's good to see you again, Sarutabi, the man spoke through the boy's mouth, a scene that was still as unnerving as the first time the Hokage had seen it. Things in Ig's mindscape have calmed since the last time the supposedly created consciousness supplied. Hiruzen would have been reassured if he trusted anything that came out of the boy's mouth while this Hakai was speaking. That's good to hear, the man said, regardless of his distrust. Try as he might, he was a little relieved hearing that, even if his mind told him not to trust this being. He'd gotten them the information about the cursed seal, at least, and that afforded him a modicum of, not trust, but certainly the benefit of the doubt. Ig, and to a lesser extent we, have been interacting with the beast, Hakai started, making Hiruzen and even the Anbu guards tense up. That could go wrong in many ways. We all agree that she behaves like a child. With her eyes that she's a newborn, basically. Our best guess as to why she acts like a child instead of a baby is that she either took some of Ig's knowledge while she was throwing her tantrums, or she took some just by existing. That was a lot to take in, especially when Hiruzen had thought this would be merely an update to let them know that everything continued as it had been before. That, or maybe asking for a report for Ig regarding his friends. We don't know how to take that either, honestly, Hakai continued, taking the Hokage's silence for what it was, uncertainty. For now, Ig is entertaining her. He turned what, in his mindscape, is training ground 33 and made it into a playground for her. Even managed to create a deer-like construct that acts the part of prey for it to hunt. Hiruzen's mind did its best to wrap itself around what he was being told. After a moment, he was fairly sure that he'd processed the report. She? He asked, more curious than confused. Hakai shrugged lightly, barely moving, really, since Ig's body was still affected by the tailed beast chakra poisoning. On top of that, the man in control of the boy's body gave the Hokage a sympathetic smile / grimace, as if he himself couldn't understand all that was going on. It was probably the case too, he supposed. We don't get that part either. Our best theory is that she wanted to differentiate herself from the three of us and chose to do that by picking a different gender, was what Hakai said after a moment, clearly unsure of what he was saying. That's our best bet, at least. Otherwise, everything points that it should have been male, if it had to have a gender at all. That was as good a theory as any, Hiruzen supposed. You said you are interacting with it now, why take that risk? Kij and I think that Ig started doing that because he wasn't entirely recovered from having his mindscape suffer such an attack, Hakai explained with a concerned frown. The Hokage had never expected his student to use such an expression. The man was growing increasingly more sure that this wasn't actually Orochimaru just trying to fool them all. Still, he was far from trusting this person. Anyway, it seems to not have been the worst decision to make, really. We think we can bond with her. IG is sure of that, actually. If he can actually manage it, we could emulate what the Kumo Jinchuriki have achieved. That sounded plausible enough, Hiruzen guessed. Risky, but if what Hakai was saying was true, it was something that had a good chance of actually being possible. It wasn't something he would have attempted, but if IG was well on his way of doing that, then it was what it was. Anything else? The Hokage asked then. Nothing else. We have theories about how to go about improving IG's situation, but we don't have enough Fuinjutsu knowledge to approach Sachigumo's situation, really. Sachigumo, the beast's name, I'm guessing Hiruzen hazarded, receiving a confirming nod. Maybe you can discuss these theories once my students come back. We've received word from them just recently. They are on their way back to Konoha as we speak. Hiruzen noted then as the boy's eye narrowed slightly at that. He wondered what he was thinking. Was he hiding something from the Hokage? Or was it just because he'd confirmed that, indeed, Tsunade was coming back to the leaf? It was difficult to tell. IG would like to know how his friends are doing, Hakai prodded then, and if there was anything that made Hiruzen be sure that he was, indeed, speaking for the boy was that. Not that he asked, but that he actually paid attention to everything the Hokage said in response. The supposedly altered Orochimaru copy listened intently as he described how IG's friends continued working to restore Konoha. He even offered advice when Hiruzen mentioned the children also focusing on training, apparently things that he, IG and Kij, which seemed to be the new name of the previous shade, had talked about in the mindscape. This was, unexpectedly, important for Hakai, or it was for IG, and that was enough for it to be important for him, most likely. Both options were pretty surprising regardless, in Hiruzen's opinion. Really, the world was full of surprises. At least this one wasn't bad, he supposed. You should inform IG of something though, Hiruzen started, wondering if he should really inform Hakai of what would be IG's mission once he wakes up. They are trading information, and the man was almost sure that the situation was truly what it looked like and not an Orochimaru plot. Even Danza, in all his paranoia, agreed that it was likely the case. The Snake Sanin simply wouldn't do something like what happened in the interrogation. Appearing so weak was simply not in his nature. And even if it was just Hakai plotting, attacking his original didn't make much sense. Oh. The man in IG's body voiced, looking at the Hokage curiously. Then he realized that something serious was coming up and his expression turned dead serious. Did something happen? Something did, indeed, happen, Hiruzen started, barely suppressing a grimace. Kiri and Iwa lost a Jinchuriki each, he said then, and the sole visible eye of the other man widened. On top of everything that's happened lately, things will be tense. Iwa is especially not happy with our decision regarding Suna's situation. As such, they want help to deal with the danger to their remaining Jinchuriki. And they want IG Hakai deduced instantly before clicking his tongue. Damn it. He moved up, and became known too fast. Indeed, Hiruzen agreed, and, for a moment, he was reminded of times when Orochimaru wasn't what he became. Better times when he could have been proud of his most talented student. Obviously, we don't plan on sending him alone, but Konoha can't afford to send too many ninjas away at times like this, especially after such an attack. The Leaf also needs to keep an eye on Kumo and Suna. Maintain people ready in case the mist needs help too, after the attack they suffered too, if you want to keep that possible alliance as it is. Hakai mused, and Hiruzen almost smiled. Indeed, he repeated simply, looking as the other man mulls over the situation. IG will manage. If he can get this chakra beast to help him, then he should be able to manage even if he were on his own. Hakai continued, almost like he was talking with himself. He's also likely to reject help from his friends, but considering that they are all clan heirs or people equally as important, it's probably for the best. The Hokage could only agree with that point too. Admirable as the display would be, sending such children out on a mission like that would be a mistake for a number of reasons. One that he wasn't willing to make too. Risking IG was already bad enough, he wouldn't make that worse. Anko is likely to join him though, Hakai observed, and this time Hiruzen did smile. That was true too. There was no way the Mitarashi would let her precious student go on such a quest. Konoha would be short of one very capable jounin, Takubetsu, yes, but everyone knew that was in name only, but that was the least they could do for IG. There might be other options that won't take from the leaf. Oh. That surprised Hiruzen. Who could Hakai possibly mean? He made it sound like they wouldn't even be from Konoha. No. Absolutely not, the Hokage denied instantly, eyes narrowing. I won't do anything, won't even mention it again, Hakai replied easily with a lazy smile. IG will probably agree with me. He can be very persuasive when he wants to be, you should know that. If he agrees with my idea, he'll go through with it and he'll make it work. For the first time in the whole conversation, Hiruzen truly hated the fact that he agreed with Hakai. Not too long after that, the man in control of IG's body went back to the mindscape. After all, the Hokage knew that he must have been in pain, considering the state of the body. Oh. IG Sata. Good to know that everyone is doing all right, he commented lightly, doing his best to ignore the other piece of news that Hakai brought with him from his visit to the waking world. IG almost wished he didn't send him to see how things were going. Silence hung over the three of them, as the youngest of them gazed upon Tsuchigumo, who was bouncing around between trees and such. She hadn't hunted much since the deers were created, but they all thought she would do so soon enough when she grew bored of just running and jumping. Some distance to the side of the small group stood a few bird constructs, the next step into their animal creation experiments. I guess your idea holds merit, IG agreed after a moment of silently considering the situation he would be in once he wakes up. With just Anko and I though, it'll be difficult to pull off. You are, once more, underestimating the loyalty that absolute fear can grant you, IG Kij pointed out, and the boy supposed that was true enough. Or maybe it was just that he wasn't a fan of using that method to gain loyalty. He much preferred to have friends over cowering subjects. The latters were much more likely to stab him in the back at the first semi-decent chance they got. And with what they had to do. Fucking hell, I thought I would have a few years before having to deal with all this shit, IG groaned, wanting to pull out his hair. Akatsuki, because of course he wouldn't have a nice time to skip to prepare for them. No, why would he think he would have it easy? We should go over the information regarding Akatsuki that you have, Hakai suggested then, looking much more composed than the boy. From there, we'll see what we can do to learn more. Once I'm back in control and able to cast jutsu, I'll pay another visit to Orochimaru, IG declared with a snarl. He'll sing like a canary if he knows what's good for him. I'll cast Wit's End on a lot of them. I'll have to train that skill too, to reduce the number of hand seals. I'm taking no chances with any of those bastards. Sounds rather unnecessary considering some of their powers and skill sets. It doesn't matter, IG snapped. They already got their hands on 2 Jinchuriki. Anymore and we could very well be screwed. We have much to plan for, it seems, Kij mused while his doppelganger nodded along. We do, the boy nodded, then he deflated. He seemed to be unable to hold on to his frustration, his fear, or his anger at the situation, for some reason. We do, he added, looking around and sighing. He was almost grateful for being trapped inside the mindscape, he realized. It was just so silent. Nothing was happening, at least since they'd managed to calm down Sachigumo. There were only the sights and almost permanent silence unless one of them said or did something to generate a sound. I almost miss the void, what does that say about me? IG wondered, chuckling weakly. IG. He heard, not sure which of the two was speaking. You two should look for a way to be different from each other. Most of the time I can tell, but it would make things easier, don't you think? The boy said, staring off into the forest of the training grounds. Silence followed his question also. You can get started with the planning and all that, yeah. I'll go and make sure that Sachigumo is entertained enough for the moment. Sure, IG, but are you? Also, you can continue with the birds if you want to, the boy continued. I think I had enough with that project after the deers and this. EI. Sure thing, IG. Another one of the Orochimaru lookalikes interrupted then. Have fun. Thanks. And with that, IG Sata walked off. It didn't take long for the developing chakra beast to realize that he was approaching her. The creature stopped and tilted her head towards him, as if curious and surprised by what he was doing. She does kind of look cute. Like an oversized puppy, IG thought with a weak smile. Hey there, girl, he called, like he would one of the dogs at the vet. I thought you'd like a playmate for a bit. IG's grin widened when the beast bounced around excitedly. Not only because it was an adorable sight but also because that same enthusiasm was transmitted directly to his mind. For once, he didn't feel weird about that. How about a game of tag, huh? That got him an 8-eyed blink. It's a game. Basically, I touch you and you are it. From there you have to touch me and then I'll be it. And so on. You know, kind of like hunting but harmless, he explained. A corner of his mind worried that it would be far from safe to play such a game with Sachigumo. He shrugged that off though. He received a happy bark in response and he grinned. Lightning came alive under his feet and he dashed towards her. She was a chakra beast, after all, mindscape or not, she was too strong to play with her normally, he supposed. Thus, IG flickered right in front of her and touched one of her legs. You are it, he announced, before dashing away with a powerful, monstrous being chasing after him. Despite that, he couldn't help but chuckle a bit. Oh. Kij. He's cracking, he voiced, grimacing. Indeed, Hakai agreed as both of them looked on as IG started playing with Sachigumo. It was understandable, really. IG had been working as hard as he could for years now. His free time decreased with each passing day and now, events kept happening, keeping him going and not giving him a moment to catch his breath. It was no wonder that the Satter's mind was giving up on him. Kij looked around a bit. He hadn't seen the mindscape in all its glory, since he'd been in the White Room until the arrival of the beast. However, if the White Room was anything to go by, the quality of the construct had declined a lot. IG didn't even seem to notice this either, which was the worrying part. The boy seemed to think that his mind was perfectly fine, back to its former glory and all that. It was a fine mindscape, Kij was sure, but considering what it must have been before, it was probably less than ideal. There was less detail, less color, and even the sun in the fake sky was dim. Is there anything we can do? Hakai asked him, and Kij had to pause and consider the question. It was certainly something to take seriously. Even if he didn't fear Igisata just as much as he feared death, there was no way anything good could come from the boy succumbing. If someone like him turned into a missing nin, the elemental nations would wish that Orochimaru could really take over him with his cursed seal. Ig was already a force to be reckoned with after just around 3 years of training. What would he be like when he was in his 20s? In his 30s? If he wasn't considered god of Shinobi by then, Kij would be very surprised. There was another option, less concerning but equally as bad, as far as Kij was concerned, and that was that Ig gave up on the world. If the boy's mind cracked, then he could very well leave the world to its own devices. He could decide to just stay in his mindscape until the void claimed his soul once more. Help him continue repairing the mindscape and try and take a bit of the load off his mind, Kij determined. How? I don't know. But there must be something we can do. Otherwise, who knows what could happen. The shade of Orochimaru really didn't want to see what would happen if Ig snapped. Someone that had survived the void and had brought that empty hell into their world shouldn't ever be in danger of such a thing. Think this is enough change? Hakai asked then, after a moment of silence. When Kij turned, he saw, not much change, really. At least if one didn't count clothes, that is. Hakai was now wearing the standard Konoha Jounin outfit with his hair pulled back. He still didn't have a headband though, which Kij supposed was for the best. I was thinking of going for the more feminine body Orochimaru took possession of, but that would have been awkward, yes. At least for Ig. Kij nodded. The two of them didn't care much for genders, truly. They were unsure if that was because they were just a soul shard and a mind construct, or because the original Orochimaru didn't care either. After all, he was the one that had possessed a female body in the first place. Should be enough, I guess, Hakai decided before grimacing. I guess we can work on this. Not that Ig won't stress wondering if we've done anything to undermine him. His grimace grew at that. Kij could only sympathize with that sentiment. It was difficult to make someone relax when they were terrified of the possibility that you would backstab them. They'd made progress, but with how Ig was, chances were that there would always be that little piece of him that would doubt. Especially so if he continued being pressured from all sides. Even the few times Ig could enjoy himself brought no reprieve. Seeing his friends would always have that small pang of fear with them, making the boy wonder if he could save them. No one's survival was guaranteed, no matter what he did, and that made Ig worry even more. There was no escape for that, Kij knew. Ig would never truly be at peace until they finally put an end to the threats he knew about. Until Madara and Kaguya were dealt with, he'd always have that sword hanging over his head. And that's only if they are the only ones to be worried about, Kij thought wryly. After all, there was pain too, but Ig was a lot more confident about taking him forward/them on. With the knowledge the boy had at his disposal, it was easy to see why he was so, but it still worried Kij. That, and how little they knew about most of the Akatsuki. Ig had a general idea of most of their skill sets, but that was far from enough. And that was only if Akatsuki were the only ones to worry about. What if there was something else that Ig didn't know? The boy himself admitted that his knowledge was spotty at best, even after revisiting memories and such in his mindscape. To his chagrin, he'd just not paid enough attention to remember most things back then. Kij couldn't blame him, really. It had been a mere source of entertainment for him back then, weird as it was to think about. And I thought the world was already crazy enough. Oh. Ig Sata. He smacked against a tree, pain spreading across his back. He didn't care much for that though, as a smile stretched his lips. Ig was having fun, honestly, and he couldn't remember the last time he'd done that for more than a few minutes. Here he had all the time in the world. Come back here, you little shit, he called, flickering around searching for Sachigumo. One would think that she would be easy to spot, since her colors didn't mend well with the forest and she was pretty big. One would be wrong, since she could basically change her body however she wanted, apparently. Fortunately, Sachigumo didn't change her colors, thank God. That would have made everything a nightmare. But she did change her size to that of a regular ninken, which was enough to complicate things. Ig blinked. Wait, why am I searching with my eyes? He wondered, before almost smacking himself in the face. He was already using the lightning flicker as if this was the outside world, so. A grin spread over his face as wires stretched from his pouch. Living thread and web sense would be very useful here. I should make games to use everyone's jutsu once I go back, Ig thought, his expression falling a little. It wasn't that he didn't want to go back and see everyone else, but his mindscape was so peaceful. Found you, he exclaimed internally, pushing away all thoughts as he rushed towards the hiding creature. Tag, you are it, he called instantly as one of his fingers touched Sachigumo's surprisingly soft fur and he flickered away. An annoyed growl followed right after him, soon accompanied by the beast herself. The game continued like that, with Sachigumo catching onto his trick and going further away and making herself even smaller, to the size of a Kamaru. Soon enough though, she seemed to grow tired, lying on a clearing in the forest in her regular ninken size. Mind if I join you? Ig asked, smiling all the while. When was the last time I was this relaxed? He wondered as he sat against Sachigumo's back when she gave permission. One of his hands moved to absently pet her between her ears. Is this what everyone had always been telling me to do? If so, he'd failed miserably in his attempts to relax after training and such. He'd taken on hobbies, of course, like drawing and free running. They probably helped too, but his mind was never entirely on that. There was always some pressing matter or future problem. There was always something to be concerned about. Why was it here and now that he could finally truly let go of all that? Blinking, he turned towards Sachigumo. Was it you? It sounded like a possibility. However, then came the real question. Why? Why was it that Ig found himself so carefree around her? It seems Sarutobi wasn't available today, Hakai told the other two, coming back from another of his visits to the outside world. Things are all over the place, Ig noted, leaning back against his chair. He'd put a set of them and a table in the middle of the clearing in the playground. Sachigumo was currently chasing after some deers. Not really hunting, much to his surprise. She seemed to enjoy the chase, probably a side effect of playing tag, he guessed. I'm not surprised, he has other stuff to take care of and it's not like we had an appointment. Indeed, now, if you would tell us the new information. Kij urged and Hakai acquiesced. The three of them took notes on notebooks to have all of it compiled for themselves. They don't have much. Which was an understatement. Hakai had gotten both Iwa and Kiri's reports regarding the incidents with their Jinchuriki. There was very little on the assailants though. Every possible witness had been killed off, leaving only what they could gather from the scene, which wasn't much at all, really. There was the possibility that either of them, Iwa more than Kiri, had withheld information, even if they had been the ones to ask for him to do this. IG really hoped that wasn't the case. The whole situation was difficult enough without the people he was trying to help working against him. Yeah, IG nodded, not looking particularly worried. We know that Deidara was in Iwa though, which is something he pointed out. After all, the report said there were plenty of signs of explosions. Too many to be anyone but Deidara. The fact that it had been in Iwa just added to that, really. Which leaves Haiden and Kakuzu as the ones that attacked Kiri, since Itakai and Kai's aim are supposed to be. IG then trailed off. His face paled, and off to the side, Sachigumo tensed. Are supposed to go after Naruto. Hakai finished with a smile that was more of a grimace. They haven't said anything about any of that happening, he added, already seeing the question coming. But they could just not want to tell me, or they could just not know, IG said, his whole body stiff. There's nothing we can do regarding that, IG Kij replied. Besides, we know the truth about Itakai. Chances are that he'll find a way to avoid that from happening. What that was went unsaid, since they all knew what it meant. I know, IG admitted, sighing wearily as he slumped forward and rested his arms on the table. Sachigumo approached behind him, laying her body behind the seat and curling her body in a C shape around the boy's chair. IG couldn't see that, but the same couldn't be said about his companions, who shared a look between themselves before deciding to act as if nothing had happened. So, we agree that it's unlikely that Nagato and Kanon were the ones to move against either of these targets? Hakai asked, bringing the conversation back to the topic at hand. Both, IG and Kij nodded at that. We can reason Deidara's presence in Iwa well enough, provided we can justify our knowledge of him at all. However, what about the rest? We need to get our hands on a bingo book, Kij offered as a response before continuing. That way, we can just say that we looked for unaffiliated people that are dangerous enough to take on a Jinchuriki. From there, we just have to find enough clues to point at the ones we know are behind all these. It could give us more information about them than what little we have to, which is a very nice plus, IG added, mulling over the idea. However, none of that helps us find them though. True, Kij nodded. Jiraiya's spy network could help us do that, in a more general sense. You'll need a tracker in your team, as it were. I guess. Anyone in mind? IG asked, receiving only head shakes in response. He expected as much, but he couldn't help but sigh regardless. I have an idea, but I don't like it. Is there anything to like about this? Hakai pointed out with a raised eyebrow. For his part, the boy could only massage the bridge of his nose. I guess the remaining part of this plan is how to deal with them. Kij continued with the brainstorming session. Deidara should be the least difficult, actually. I would say Haiden, IG countered. His immortality shtick is annoying, but if one knows about it, it can be countered easily enough. Don't let him do his ritual thing and incapacitate him before making sure he's permanently out of the equation, even if he doesn't die. That's true, Hakai nodded. After that comes Deidara. Then Sasori and Kakuzu, I suppose. Kanon and Nagato shouldn't be a concern for a while. Or, I hope so, at least, IG continued. If they are though, I think Kanon might actually be the most difficult of the two. We know how the paths work, more or less, Hakai nodded again. And we also know to look for Nagato's main body too. Kanon, on the other hand, has a simpler power but a more troublesome one too. Yeah, so, about this team I'll have to work with. It'd be better if we make plans for them too, for how they'll help, if I get them to work with me. When you get them to work for you, Kij corrected, a corner of his mouth twitching up at the same time as Ige's eyebrow. And also in case we have to deal with them, the boy continued, ignoring the interrupting. In the very unlikely case that happens, Hakai added his own part, much to Ige's annoyance. But, yes, that would be for the best. Lots of plans to make, Ige noted with a grimace. Oh. Hiruzen Sarutobi. He was growing increasingly more annoyed and tired as the day went by. The Hokage thought that was justified though, since not only was the current world situation looking pretty bad, but also everything seemed to have decided to happen that precise day. First, he had a meeting with the Suna siblings, which were some of the few sand ninja that remained in the leaf. The rest had been sent back with the request, red demand, that Konoha was making regarding their choice for Kazekage. Second, immediately after it finished, he received word that Hakai had made another appearance. It irked him that he hadn't been there to interact with the man this time. Hiruzen was, after all, one of the people that knew Orochimaru better to try and read his expressions. Not that it would do much for anyone, but something was better than nothing. At least Danza had indirectly taken matters in his own hands regarding that. A small comfort, really, when Hiruzen was told that they'd given Hakai rather detailed information. Considering what a risk it was to give such a person any kind of intel, he thought he could be excused if the notion made him nervous. If only they could send a Yamanaka into Ige's mind to check. Alas, Inoichi had advised against doing that, since from what they'd been told, the mindscape had suffered extensive damage. An intrusion of any kind could make things worse and they couldn't risk that. Inconvenient, but understandable. And lastly, his students had finally arrived back into the village. Normally, that would have been good, if not for the news that they had brought with them. Itakai Uchiha and Kaizen Hoshigeki were part of the group that seemed to be targeting Jinchuriki. Hiruzen could almost hear the thoughts of Iwa's more resentful people, theorizing about how Konoha and Kiri were working against them, never mind that the mist had been a victim too. He didn't envy Onaki's position, honestly. This, however, meant that the group was moving to get Naruto, which was bad with capital B. They'd have no other option other than keep the boy inside Konoha, but that was a temporary solution at best. It was probably what every other village was doing at the moment, except Suna and Kumo, since their Jinchuriki were currently in the leaf. Jinchuriki were weapons though, even if Hiruzen didn't like thinking on those terms. They were assets, and an asset that couldn't be used was like not having it at all. That, and Naruto was unlikely to take well to being confined inside the village too, which was something to take into account. Hiruzen didn't want to find out what the boy would do if they tested his patience, especially with how incredibly fast he advanced in Fuinjutsu. The Hokage shuddered even thinking of the things the blonde could do now. Regardless of that, this mysterious group would strike again, of that Hiruzen had no doubt. Where and how, he didn't know, but it was unlikely that just holding the Jinchuriki would work for long. Eventually, they might grow tired and attack the villages themselves. Just from the one pair of them they knew of, and what they had achieved in 2 different nations, he knew that they had more than enough firepower to attack a village and likely get away with it, especially a weakened one, which was the case for most of them really, except maybe Iwa. Hiruzen had the sudden urge to send away the Kumo and Suna people that were currently in Konoha. Alas, it was for the best that he didn't. The people from the cloud had one last thing they had asked of him, and he'd accepted, if only to offer a modicum of goodwill. How much good would that do, now that I wouldn't be Raikage anymore? He didn't know, but it could hurt. Furthermore, the lessons/meetings that he was holding with the Ichibi Jinchuriki were both necessary and interesting. The boy was very apathetic, but he seemed to be growing out of that too, slowly and awkwardly, but he was doing so. Ig had certainly managed to make an impression, that was for sure. Speaking of, Hiruzen was growing more and more concerned about sending Ig on this mission. If only the situation in Iowa wasn't what it was. He'd have to make sure the boy had a good team when he went on his mission. With the kind of people that seemed to be part of this group, he'd need all the help he could get. As it was, his condition is bad, Tsunade informed them, as if they didn't know that already. They had left Shitsune, her student, in another room, still recovering from same hardest attack, and promptly took Hiruzen's student to the Satter's room. She'd been checking him over for a while now. Really bad. I don't know how he's still alive, if I'm honest, especially if he's been like this as long as I was told. Hiruzen almost grimaced at the look on Naruto's face as he heard that. A case of tailed beast chakra poisoning this bad should have killed him long ago, Tsunade continued, apparently unaware or uncaring of how her words were received. The Hokage suspected the first. She seemed entirely focused on her examination of the boy. I'll have to keep an eye on him for the next few days, to see if he's getting better, worse, or if the situation continues as is. I doubt it's the second though, since he doesn't look as bad as if that were the case. From my side, I can only help him withstand the effect a little better and help him along his recovery, if he can develop a resistance to that chakra. That's all I can do. I'll have to check the information you got on the cursed seal and see if I can turn it into a Jinchuriki. Jiraiya continued from there, his face, for once, the picture of seriousness. I can't guarantee anything though, since I know nothing of how Orochimaru made the seal as of now. I'm sorry, the Toad Sage added, seeing his blonde student's face. Can I help? Naruto asked, more a plea than a question. Sasuke looked a breath away from doing the same, before seemingly realizing that his skill set was pretty much useless in this case. That only made the boy grimace and frown. Sure thing, kiddo, Jiraiya accepted easily, putting a hand over the Uzumaki's head and ruffling his hair. I can always use your weird ideas. If Hiruzen hadn't known Naruto as he did, he would have questioned the wisdom of letting a genin learn about the workings of the cursed seal. But he did know the blonde, and if there was one thing he was sure of, it was that Naruto didn't have a bad bone in his body. For now, you two need to rest, Hiruzen told the two genin, who both looked ready to protest. It warmed his heart to see such camaraderie in children so young, but it wasn't the time for that. There's nothing you can do as tired as you are, he added, pointing out the obviously weary signs on both boys, who sagged at his words. They looked ready to fall down at any moment already. Okay, Jiji, Naruto replied in the end, with Sasuke humming along. Both looked like he'd told them to give up being ninja or something of the sort. Fortunately, they didn't cause too much trouble on their way out, only twitching occasionally, as if they were about to turn around and stay anyway. Sensei? Jiraiya asked, and Hiruzen realized that both of his students knew he had something to tell them. His lips twitched up at that, proud of how much those children he'd taught had grown. If only Orochimaru hadn't gone the path he did. Shaking his head, he focused himself again. Ig has woken up 3 times so far, he informed them, and he saw both frown at those words. If he did, why didn't you wait until just now? Tsunade asked, clearly as suspicious as his teammate. Because it wasn't him the one in control of his body, Hiruzen said then, causing both of them to react in unison once more, tensing this time. In any other situation that would have been funny. Alas, this wasn't the case at the time. Orochimaru's seal. Jiraiya guessed instantly, coming to the conclusion Hiruzen had that first time. I've told you about what IG did to keep his mark under control, haven't it? Hiruzen decided to start with, causing the Toad Sage's frown to deepen. He kept Orochimaru's influence at bay through what I've been told is very impressive control of his mindscape, the white-haired man replied, unsure of where he was going for a moment. Then his eyes widened. This damaged his mindscape. Did that cause? It did damage his mindscape, Hiruzen interrupted, making sure he had both of his students' attention. But that was the tailed beast's chakra reacting in a very specific way with IG's mark. According to our intel, it created a chakra beast. So that's why you want a Jinchuriki seal, Jiraiya pieced together in a second. Not to keep the tailed beast chakra under control and take away the cursed seal. What does that have to do with someone taking over the satyr's body? Tsunade prodded. Did the chakra beast do that? No. IG kept the cursed seal under control with his mindscape construct, yes, but he also had another measure to keep an eye on Orochimaru's shade. He made a copy of said shade, one that he could place modifications and, more importantly, restrictions on. An Orochimaru that would be on his side, Jiraiya mumbled, looking both impressed and horrified. Did it work though? He asked, clearly disbelieving. Surprisingly, it seems to have done so. Well, that and he made both his creation and the shade fear him too much to even try to search for a loophole in his restrictions, Hiruzen informed them, drawing wide-eyed looks from both. How? Tsunade breathed. That was done through a technique of his own making that, if we ever get him to teach it to us, we'll be going straight into the Kinjutsu scroll. Regardless of that, the one that has been in control of IG's body is his mindscape's guardian, Hakai, as he likes to be called. I'm guessing you're telling us in case he wakes up again? Tsunade asked, still looking pretty shaken from the news she'd just heard. I'll try not to punch his face in. No promises though. Tsunade. Fine, the woman sighed before grimacing. Please tell me that this Hakai isn't as insufferable as Orochimaru. He reminds me of Orochimaru before he started turning into what he became, Hiruzen confessed, looking forlornly at IG's unconscious body, as if that would bring Hakai. How would that feel, having his 3 students once more with him? Fake, he supposed, since Hakai wasn't actually Orochimaru. He could only smile sadly at that thought. I'm not sure that's a good thing, Sensei, Jiraiya said, and Hiruzen would admit that there was wisdom in those words, but he hadn't met Hakai. The Hokage had already gone through every paranoid and not so paranoid thought regarding this situation and concluded that chances were that things actually were what they looked like, surprisingly enough. I know, Jiraiya, Hiruzen patiently replied. But I'm not the only one that thinks the situation is under control. And regardless of our thoughts, we are still keeping an eye on him. We won't let our guards down until we can actually confirm that IG is there somewhere and that he's alright and in control. I guess that's as good as we can have things, the Toad Sage sighed. Why can't prodigies and geniuses be normal? Because they wouldn't be any of those things if they were, Hiruzen pointed out, keeping to himself what he thought of the hypocrisy in the statement. After all, he knew that Jiraiya didn't count himself in any of those groups, for whatever reason. Well, that's nice and all, but I have work to do. Now, if you two would please leave. Tsunade asked with a frown. The Hokage simply nodded and left. His student had come back and that was a victory in itself. No need to push things with her for now. Oh. Sachigumo. The calm one, Ig, hadn't been very calm lately. Something had taken his calm away and Sachigumo didn't know what or who it was, but she'd very much like to do something to it or them. Several things, actually. As it was, she could do nothing. At least while Ig still liked the matching duo. After all, one of them had told Ig something that made the calm disappear. That was good enough a reason for Sachigumo, but not for Ig, sadly. A shame. So, she'd been doing what she could to give him calm again, like he'd done for her. It wasn't easy, she'd found. It brought a new sense of appreciation for what he'd done, that was for sure. Still, Ig liked being close to her, so she stayed close. Ig liked petting her, so she let him, often pressing herself on him. It wasn't a great sacrifice, really, since she liked those things too. Silently, Sachigumo waited. Waited for him to recover and give her peace again. Waited for her chance to make the one or ones that caused this pay. Was it this Akatsuki Ig and the pair kept mentioning? She thought so. If that was the case, she could wait. Soon enough, she'd be able to get what she wanted. Sachi Ig spoke softly, apparently done chatting with the pair. She looked up at him. He smiled softly at her, petting the spot between her 8 eyes. Some of the calm returned to him, apparently, she could feel it. And thus, some returned to her. Good, she thought, and if she could, she would have smiled. Sachigumo rather liked her new form, however. It wasn't very expressive, but Sachigumo found it familiar, although that may not have been the word. Words were hard. Yes, she'd rather remain in a shape that didn't need to talk. Ig understood most of what she meant, and if not, she had her ways. Would you like to play some more? Ig asked after a moment in which he seemed to just enjoy Sachigumo's presence. He had good taste, at least. She perked up, ears and all, and started vibrating in place. Ig understood. I'll take that as a yes. What do you think? More tag? Hide and seek? Tag had been fun, Sachigumo was ready for another go at that any day. Hide and seek, she didn't know that one though and conveyed her situation with a tilt of her head. Ig chuckled before shaking his head. Right, so, hide and seek is a game, similar to tag, but not, he explained. Well, that explained everything, not. She tilted her head to the other side as Ig continued petting her. One player gives the others some time to hide before they go out and seek, you get what I mean. One person seeks and the others hide. Oh. That sounded fun to Sachigumo. It was like hunting, just like tag. A different kind of hunting though. Yes, she was pretty sure that she would enjoy this game too. She'd never truly hunted yet, but she knew that she'd like it. She bounced around for a moment, urging Ig so that they could get started already. Sometimes he was just so slow to do anything. He laughed, as if she was the silly one for wanting to get to playing. What was he even doing just standing there? Okay. Let's try hide and seek, yeah. You hide and I'll seek, then we switch. Now, go. Before he was even done, she was already rushing out to the forest. Sachigumo slowed a little at that, noticing that Ig's mood dropped the moment she left. He stood there for a bit, although he didn't seem to be waiting for her to hide, not really. He seemed to be thinking. Sachigumo had found that it wasn't a good thing for Ig to do. His mood always crashed when he did. Any semblance of calm replaced with nerves and fear. She didn't like it. Sachigumo howled, snapping him from his thoughts. He looked around, as if remembering what he was supposed to do, and started just walking towards the forest. She was pretty sure that it was to give her some more time, since she'd given away her position. IG was nice like that. Now where would be a good spot to hide? That looked good enough, she guessed. Her position chosen, she made sure that she was as out of view as she could get. Then, she started thinking. How was she going to help IG with these things that seemed to make him not calm? All his problems seemed to come from outside. Sachigumo wasn't entirely sure what all that was about, but it was somewhere she hadn't been before, that was for sure. Maybe she could go with him. But what if she couldn't? Well, Sachigumo had energy. Lots of energy, really. It was what made her herself. She'd noticed that neither the pair nor IG had energy. Maybe she could give energy to IG. Maybe then he would be like her. Or not, but that could help, right? She didn't know how that would feel though. Would it hurt? Energy made her. Would she change if she gave some of it away? Something to think about. At least she'd have something to do while IG and the pair talked. They talked a lot after all. Sachigumo didn't see the appeal, but then again, they wore clothes too, and she didn't see the appeal in that either. Different people liked different things, maybe. That would explain it, right? Or maybe it was because they didn't have energy and she did. She didn't know. People were weird. That's it, guy, for now. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Thanks for watching.